On an episode of Prime News last week, I talked about how there was a physical copy of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate out in the wild, and potentially more. I put up a news post about it on our website as well, NintendoPrime.net, which you can go check out to get additional news beyond just what I post here on YouTube. But the big deal with this isn't so much that someone got their hands on a retail copy a couple weeks early. It's that the ROM itself is actually out in the wild. So I don't know if the person who had that particular copy or someone who had a review copy or whatever happened, is they put it out there weeks ahead of time. And now there are people pirating the game and playing it directly on their Switch through hacked switches and all that stuff. And this is exactly why that $12 million lawsuit, settlement, whatever, came down against sites like Love ROMs and potentially future ROM sites, because while a ROM like this is obviously still going to find a way to spread, this is the internet. You don't need a centralized location to spread ROMs because, again, it's the internet. Still, Nintendo had to do something. And the problem with their something is that it feels like just an attack on retro games, right? It feels like that lawsuit and going after ROM sites was about taking out, NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, SNES, GameCube. But it was really more of a general, statement throughout the whole industry that Nintendo will not, tolerate ROMs, will not tolerate pirating their games. And the problem, obviously, like when Pokemon Moon leaked, when Let's Go leaked a few days ahead of time, or now weeks ahead of time for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, is that it's harder and harder for Nintendo to do something about that. Now, see, the obvious choice, Nintendo has to just never send out review copies. Don't send out physical copies until, to retailers till a couple days ahead of time. And even then, something could happen in transit. So it's never a 100% perfect method, but that obviously would hurt coverage of the game. That would hurt, getting reviews out on time. That would hurt a lot of potential hype for the game coming from people besides Nintendo, because a lot of consumers out there, they, as much as they might trust a Nintendo or trust a company making a product, it's good to hear, some honest reviews about that product before you buy it. And if you have to wait to get those reviews to weeks and weeks after the product comes out, that's going to be a problem for many, many consumers, and it could be a potential problem for Nintendo where there's lower sales at launch. Now, look, I'm not talking about the fact that, all the cutscenes from the story mode are out there. I mean, I'm surprised Nintendo hasn't copyright strike those channels yet and taken those videos out. Maybe they're in the process of figuring out how to do that, because Nintendo's been being a bit nicer on YouTube, believe it or not. Yeah, Nintendo still claims some videos and does some dumb things, but they've been a lot more lenient on YouTube. You can put any Pokemon footage from Let's Go you want up, cutscenes or otherwise. Nintendo doesn't touch you. Granted, it's on Game Freak and the Pokemon Company. Nintendo's the publisher. They could claim it. They don't. You can put up anything from Smash Bros. Nintendo's not claiming it. So I think Nintendo's trying to be nicer towards YouTubers, and you even see this in some of the advertising going on for Super Smash Bros. There's been particular YouTubers Nintendo's been partnering up with. I think Matthew Santoro was one as an example, where they're partnering with these YouTubers to talk about their favorite fighters in Smash Bros. And doing like a little skit. And it's really, really cool that that's happening, because it shows a shift at Nintendo, the company, where they're not really shunning the YouTube community anymore. They're trying better and better to embrace it. Granted, they're still copyright claiming specific types of videos and stuff like that, but that's something that, I think might be less and less of a problem with new games moving forward, because I've only had it be a problem right now with either when I show cutscenes in Breath of the Wild, that gets claimed, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which, again, the copyright claims for that date back to the Wii U, so I mean that's not too surprising. Or basically anything before Switch, it was really easy to get copyright claimed for, and not strikes, by the way. Nintendo doesn't usually do strikes, just the claims where they put ads on it and take all the revenue away, and make people that are like me making a living on YouTube less and less able to do so. But when it comes to this particular aspect, I can't get mad at Nintendo anymore. I wasn't sure what to think at first when they went after ROM sites, because there's people that care about game preservation, which, then there's people that say, oh, how dare you assume that Nintendo doesn't preserve their own games? And I think this is more prevalent with other companies who have proven that they don't preserve their games. We don't have any proof from Nintendo that they don't have, preserved copies of their games. Plus, them having preserved copies doesn't mean the public has preserved copies of it. You know, if you bought like Dodgeball on the NES back in the day and your copy on NES no longer works, you know, short of spending, you know, a good chunk of money to get another copy, you're kind of crap out of luck for playing that game in the future. So I get why some people are okay with ROM sites and stuff, even if I'm against piracy and I'm against emulation and ROM. Like, I shouldn't say I'm completely against. I think some of the cool modifications people do, like HDing games, running them in 4K, throwing Shrek into Breath of the Wild, I think all that's all good-natured and in good fun. It doesn't really promote piracy because a lot of that's just emulation, which I think emulating a game on PC is a little different than straight-up piracy, which is what is happening with Switch right now. Because most Switch games, well, we're getting to a point with emulators, they can be booted on PC. Some of them kind of sort of in a playable state, you know, usually the more simplistic games, indie titles, etc. In general, Switch games still can't really be fully emulated on PC. So when you see, like, you know, things getting fully pirated and now live streamed, by the way, people are streaming Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. They're streaming the hacked Switch with, you know, running a pirated copy of it on the Switch. And that, to me, is a much bigger issue than Nintendo going after ROM sites. And I think Nintendo, by doing the ROM site thing, they're trying to set this precedent where, like, hey, look, go ahead, keep distributing these ROMs. We're eventually going to get to you, too. And not just like the individuals who might be distributing them, because if it's a review copy, there is stuff they can put in the code base of that copy to track down which outlet it came from, and then they can go after that outlet and go after the individual who had access to that, or multiple individuals who had access to that copy. So Nintendo can already do something about review copies and making sure that the outlets that are leaking it are being punished. But in terms of, you know, fell off the truck, people taking it from, you know, from the back stock room at various retailers like GameStop, Walmart, etc., it's hard for Nintendo to stop that and track down who individually done that. Even if they could track down where, you know, which store, you know, the game came from, because maybe they want to get the tracking going that far to know which store a particular game went to. They still have to, you know, figure out who individually did it, and that's going to be very, very difficult. So they're not going to, like, punish all of Walmart because one employee stole something, right? Like, that's just asinine for them to do that. They would be losing out on so many sales that Nintendo's not going to do that, right? It's just not within a reasonable expectation. So I think what Nintendo, the next steps for Nintendo are to combat against piracy and to combat against ROMs, is this start shifting away from some of the retro ROM sites, because there's more of them out there, even though they just set a precedent, and start focusing on ways that people are distributing some of these Switch ROMs. You know, I'm not sure where they, you know, have to go after. You know, back in the day, it used to be like LimeWire. Do you make LimeWire, you know, legally responsible for distribution of illegal things? I don't know. A lot of peer-to-peer transfer sites. There's so many methods to do it. I think Nintendo's best option is to try to just go after the most popular websites and the most popular ways of ROM distribution to make it where basically it's still being distributed on the internet, but you kind of have to go more towards the dark web side of things, which, by the way, 99.9% of people who use the internet don't even know how to go to the dark web. So it's, you know, I think that's the best course for Nintendo to kind of push back that as much as they can into there and get the lawsuits going against these websites about the distribution and being legally responsible for the distribution. Or if they're not if there's a way to get around the legally responsible thing because it's just a peer-to-peer thing, providing the information on where the source of that's coming from. And on top of that, that could lead to multiple lawsuits because when people are doing peer-to-peer, what happens is the more people that download it, the more seeds there are for it. So the more locations people are re-downloading that ROM from. Nintendo could potentially go after anyone who's seeding the game on their computer to allow other people to download it because you are technically distributing, even though most of you guys don't think about that when you download something like that, and it's reseeding out there and people are downloading it off your computer. You don't think that you're distributing, but you actually are. You downloaded it and you are redistributing it, which is illegal. Technically, downloading it is illegal as well, but I think it's a lot harder for Nintendo to go after that because then they got to figure out ISP stuff. Whereas just going after people who are seeding it and reseeding it and distributing it are going to be much easier for Nintendo. And I think that, unfortunately, for those of you out there that do this, might be Nintendo's next step. Now they went after ROM sites. Next is going after the distributions that aren't specifically for ROMs and going after individuals who are seeding things. And if Nintendo does that, I think you might see a big shift in piracy on Switch. Not that ROMs of games won't make it around the internet. Not that dumps of the games and leaks won't make it around the internet, because it's still going to happen. But you can deter like the idea that people are live streaming this. I mean, there's no better way to scream, I am doing something I should not be doing, than weeks before the game comes out, live streaming the game. There's no better way to scream, I am doing something I shouldn't be doing, than on YouTube, putting together all the cutscenes from World of Light and releasing them on YouTube. You are literally giving Nintendo like, hey, look at me, Nintendo, come after me now, because they can. They can come after you hardcore. They might not be able to come after you. I mean, they can copyright claim and strike your channel, but they're not going to necessarily come after you in terms of like, oh my God, it's illegal that you're streaming this. But they can find out if that copy you have is a legal, legit copy or not. And if you're media, well, you're screwed. Nintendo's going to blacklist you for life. And if you're not, and you're someone playing a hacked ROM version, don't be surprised if you get a letter in the mail and the Nintendo ninjas showing up at your door. Nintendo takes this stuff very, very seriously. They've been trying to combat this kind of piracy for years. They realize it's a very difficult battle. There's so many logistics legally to even do anything about it. And this is why they go after some of the low-hanging fruit, the love ROMs of the world. Emu Paradise, which decided to stop hosting ROMs because of the lawsuit against love ROMs. Like, those are the low-hanging fruits. Those are it's so obvious and so blatantly copyright infringement and so easy to track down who's doing it that Nintendo can go after them. And it's just a really low-hanging fruit. But I think that low-hanging fruit, the idea Nintendo's trying to do is send shockwaves from the fruit to the branches to the to the trunk all the way down to the roots, because Nintendo is trying so hard to stop these things from happening. I don't know if they'll ever be 100% successful, but they could make it a lot more difficult and make people that are doing it at least think twice if there's a chance of millions of dollars in legal repercussions for doing it. So yeah, I'm sorry for those of you that have been spoiled, especially the YouTubers out there. I'm not going to name anyone individually, but there's been some really crappy YouTubers out there that are putting spoilers in the titles, spoilers in the thumbnails, not even giving you an option, to view those spoilers. If you just see, here's all the cutscenes from World of Light, and it's just like a generic screenshot on, that from the one cutscene we already know about. I don't think that is necessarily as crappy, even though they shouldn't be releasing all those. But at least then you're choosing to see all those cutscenes, right? Versus people that are just spoiling things like crazy. And this is the stuff that upsets Sakurai as well. Anyone who actually cares about Smash Bros. And cares about the guy who's the head of Smash Bros. Should know that this kind of stuff keeps him up at night. This is why we weren't getting story modes. He hates things leaking like this. Okay, he was against the streaming of it. He seems to be coming around on game streaming and competitive Smash, but like this, weeks ahead of time, man. So be careful out there. I'm not going to tell you to stop pirating games, because you're going to do what you do regardless of what I say. But I think that this is the kind of thing Nintendo's trying to stop, and it's the kind of thing that they have to start with the easiest to go after thing and then kind of work their way in, because it's hard to go right at the root of the problem without going at the outside fringes of it, because that's going to lead to more connections to the inside, to the inside, to the inside. Like Nintendo owning LoveRoms.com, they can maybe even start to find out where LoveRoms got all their ROMs from, right? Because they probably didn't create them all themselves. So, where was that ROM from, and trying to trace a tree down the branches there and figure this all out. But, man, I don't like this. This is not like, I don't like this kind of news. So, let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below. I'm Nathaniel Rufflegans from Nintendo Prime, and I want to apologize. Throughout this video, you've been watching Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee footage, maybe even some repeat footage of stuff I've shown before. Again, my capture card's broken. There's a new one coming here within like a week or two, so we'll get some fresh footage for you guys, especially when Smash Bros. Comes out. I could have just reused my E3 Smash Bros. Footage, but I've reused it like, I don't even know, 36 times now. I figured it would be better just to show you some gameplay you maybe haven't seen of a game versus just more of the E3 fights that I was able to record. All right, folks, I'm Nathaniel Rufflegans from Nintendo Prime. If you'd like to win a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate Nintendo Switch bundle, there's a Gleam.io link down in the description. And yeah, I'll just catch all you guys in the next one.